I remember that night like it was yesterday. 60 years on this earth, 30 in the Navy, and that storm still sits in my gut. I was young then, maybe 25, driving a big Navy supply truck. We called her Big Iron. I was soaked through, gripping the wheel, trying to keep that truck pointed straight on a Virginia highway that looked like a black river. The wipers were fighting a losing battle, just slap, slap, slap against the rain. It was near midnight, the last haul of a 16-hour resupply run back to Norfolk. They knew me then as Lieutenant Daniel Hayes, Logistics Division. That night, I figured my only enemy was exhaustion. I was wrong. Lightning split the sky right over the marshland. The road slicked up like wet obsidian. Somewhere between Franklin and Suffolk, I spotted them. A pair of hazard lights, barely holding their own against the gray wall of water. At first, I thought it was just road debris. Then I saw it clearly. A dark SUV pulled over, hood up, tail lights dimming. The Navy manual, thick as a Bible in my glove compartment, told me one thing: no unauthorized stops during classified transport. But my mother's voice, the quiet one from the reservation, whispered something else. I slowed down. A man was out in the sheets of rain, waving both arms. Behind him, through the fogged glass, I saw them, a woman and a small child huddled together. My chest tightened. Civilians stranded out here in the middle of nowhere in a Category 2 blow. Keep going, I told myself. 30 miles to base. Call it in safe. But I didn't push the accelerator. Instead, I eased Big Iron onto the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. I could already hear my commanding officer screaming about protocol. I pulled on my heavy poncho and stepped out into the downpour. The man yelled over the wind. "Engine's dead. No signal out here." I nodded, motioned him back to the car. "Stay with your family, sir. I'll check." I knelt in the muddy wash, my flashlight cutting through the steam rising from the flooded engine. The stench of burnt wires and old coolant told the whole story. It was hopeless. I trudged back to his window. "You're not going anywhere tonight," I told him. "Nearest tower service is closed. Next town's 20 miles. His face just fell. "We'll freeze out here. Not if I can help it." I went to my toolbox and hauled out a set of heavy-duty chains. Standard Navy issue for rough terrain. The man tried to protest, but I cut him off with a half-smile. "Sir," I said, pulling my hood tighter, "consider this a logistics exercise." The storm howled around me while I hooked the SUV to the back of my truck. My uniform was plastered to my skin. Water filled my boots with every step. When everything was secure, I climbed back into the cab, checking my mirror. The faint glow of their headlights was right behind me. "All right," I muttered, shifting the gear stick. "Let's get you home." We moved at a crawl down that empty highway, the wipers thumping time to the pounding rain. Occasionally, his voice would crackle over the CB I'd handed him. "Still there, Lieutenant?" "Still here," I'd answer. "Hang tight." After 40 minutes of careful driving, the soft, familiar glow of a small roadside motel appeared through the mist. Relief washed over me. I pulled into the parking lot, unhooked the chains, and checked his SUV one last time. The man stepped out, drenched, his eyes bright with something like awe. "I don't have much cash," he said, fumbling with his wallet. "At least let me pay you for fuel." I shook my head. "Not necessary. Get your family warm. That's all that matters." He studied me for a moment like he was trying to memorize my face. "What's your name, Lieutenant?" "Daniel Hayes," I replied. He nodded slowly. "You've done more than you know." I climbed back into my truck. As I started the engine, lightning flashed one last time, illuminating his silhouette beside the motel sign. He raised a hand in farewell. I returned the gesture and drove off into the remnants of the storm. The base gate appeared near dawn, fog clinging to the asphalt. The sentry saluted as I rolled through. "Rough night, sir." "You could say that," I muttered, managing a tired smile. Inside the logistics hangar, the duty officer took my report without comment. All I wanted was a shower and 6 hours of sleep, but a note was already waiting on my desk. "Report to Captain Briggs. 700 sharp," I sighed. That meant trouble. As I trudged to my quarters, fatigue hit me like a rogue wave. I replayed the night. The child's frightened eyes, the man's handshake, the storm swallowing the road behind me. I knew I had broken protocol, but if they gave me the choice again, I'd stop every single time. Outside my window, the wind finally eased. Dawn crept over the base, soft pink light glinting off the wet steel of the hangars. Somewhere in a roadside motel, a family was safe, and somewhere else, a report was being written with my name on it. The Navy taught me to follow orders. That night taught me when not to. The next morning came far too soon. My uniform was still damp around the cuffs as I stood outside Captain Briggs's office, my stomach tight. The door opened with a metallic click. "Lieutenant Hayes," his aide barked. "You're up." I straightened my jacket, stepped inside, and saluted. Captain Briggs barely looked up from his desk. His hair was perfect, his ribbons aligned with mathematical precision. The smell of burnt coffee hung in the air. Without returning my salute, he slid a document across the desk. "Do you know what this is, Lieutenant?" I glanced down. It was a formal reprimand. Disobedience of Standing Order 7A, no unsanctioned civilian interaction during active transport. "Yes, sir," I said quietly. He leaned back in his chair. "Then you understand what this means. You jeopardized classified cargo and compromised our timeline." His voice was clipped, every syllable sharp. "With respect, sir," I replied, keeping my eyes steady. "There was a family stranded in the storm, a child." Briggs slammed his pen down. "A child does not override Navy protocol." Silence filled the room. I kept my eyes fixed on the framed motto behind him: order, duty, precision. He continued, voice low and deliberate. "You've been one of our better officers, Hayes, but I cannot allow sentiment to dictate logistics. You will be reassigned to base operations until further notice." The words hit harder than any punishment. Base operations meant desk duty, paperwork, no convoys, no field missions, just walls and silence. "Yes, sir," I said. He signed the document with a flourish and handed it to me. "Dismissed." As I turned to leave, I caught the smirk of Lieutenant Miller, my peer and constant rival, leaning in the doorway with a mug of coffee. "Tough break, Hayes," he murmured. "Next time, try saving the world on your own time." I walked past him without a word. The logistics office felt foreign after weeks on the road. Rows of computers hummed under fluorescent lights. The air smelled of stale ink. My new supervisor, Chief Petty Officer Laram, was polite but distant. "You'll be entering inventory data until further notice," she said, sliding a stack of forms toward me. "Keep your head down, Lieutenant. People talk." I nodded, sinking into the chair. Around me, the dull rhythm of keyboards filled the silence. Outside the window, cargo planes rolled down the tarmac, missions I used to lead. Every evening, I ran the same loop around the base perimeter to clear my head. The night wind off the Atlantic was sharp, almost punishing. I kept seeing that child's face through the rain, the way she'd pressed her hands against the glass. I wasn't proud. I wasn't heroic. I was just someone who couldn't drive past. A week later, during a morning briefing, Captain Briggs made an example of me. "This," he announced to the room, holding up a copy of my reprimand, "is what happens when protocol is ignored. Logistics is not charity, it's precision." I stayed silent, my jaw tight. Miller shot me a look of thinly veiled amusement. After the meeting, Chief Morales, an older mechanic with decades of service, found me near the hangar. His hands were still stained with oil. "Rough day, sir?" he asked. "You could say that." He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling up into the morning light. "Back when I was your age, I stopped a convoy once. Saved a kid from a wrecked car on a Minus 64. Got written up too." I looked at him. "What happened?" He smiled faintly. "Nothing good, but I'd do it again. Sometimes the uniform forgets it's worn by people." His words lingered long after he walked away. 2 weeks passed. Desk duty became routine, mind-numbing but safe. My reports were precise, but the silence in that office felt heavier than any storm. One evening I lingered by the pier, watching the sunset burn across the water. Navy ships rested at anchor, steel silhouettes against the fading sky. I wondered if the family I'd helped ever made it home. Maybe they'd already forgotten me. As I turned to leave, a young ensign jogged up with a clipboard. "Lieutenant Hayes, Captain Briggs requests your presence immediately." My pulse quickened. Another reprimand. I followed him back through the corridor, my boots echoing on the tile. Inside Briggs's office, the air felt different, tense, but uncertain. 2 chairs faced his desk. One was occupied. A man rose as I entered. Gray hair, calm eyes, and an unmistakable presence. His uniform gleamed with silver stars, 4 of them. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. "Lieutenant Hayes," Briggs said stiffly, "allow me to introduce Admiral Warren, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations." The Admiral extended his hand. His eyes held a faint, knowing glimmer. "Good morning, Lieutenant. I believe we've met before." I froze, the recognition crashing through me like thunder. The storm, the stranded car, the man who had asked my name. Captain Briggs blinked, oblivious to the tension. "Admiral Warren is here to review our logistics program." But the Admiral wasn't looking at Briggs. His gaze stayed on me, calm, measured, and unmistakably familiar. I saluted, my heart pounding. "Sir, yes, sir," he returned the salute. "Let's talk about protocol, shall we?" I didn't sleep much after that meeting. The Admiral's eyes had followed me long after I left Captain Briggs's office, steady, unreadable, yet strangely kind. Everyone on base was buzzing about his unannounced inspection. Briggs strutted around like a man auditioning for a promotion, polishing his desk for the 10th time. As for me, I kept my head down, losing myself in spreadsheets and requisition forms. But every time thunder rolled over the bay, I remembered that night on Route 58. The sound of the chains, the weight of the storm, the man's voice. "You've done more than you know." 3 days later, we were ordered to prepare a presentation for the Admiral. I spent the afternoon organizing fuel logistics data. Miller, my rival, leaned against the file cabinet, smirking. "You still here, Hayes? Thought you'd be discharged by now." I didn't answer. He grinned wider. "Guess crying in a storm doesn't get you a medal after all." I kept typing, calm, steady. "Some medals don't need metal," I said quietly. He frowned, not understanding. "What's that supposed to mean?" But before I could answer, Chief Laram entered with new orders. "Everyone dress blues tomorrow. The Admiral's visiting the operations center at 900 sharp." Miller straightened his collar, suddenly serious. I simply nodded. That night I walked down to the docks. The sky was clear for once, stars reflecting on the still water. The base was quiet except for the distant hum of generators. I leaned against the railing, breathing in the salt air. I thought about my father, a Navy chief before he retired. He used to tell me that real service wasn't about applause, it was about conscience. "If you follow every rule without thinking, you're just a uniform," he'd said. "But when you follow what's right, you're a sailor." I'd broken a rule, but maybe I'd stayed a sailor. Morning came with sharp sunlight cutting through the clouds. The base shimmered with nervous energy. Flags were raised, boots shined, brass polished. Admiral Warren's convoy rolled in at 900 exactly. From my office window, I saw him step out of a black sedan. His posture was easy. No arrogance, just authority that didn't need to prove itself. Captain Briggs met him at the gate, practically saluting before the door opened. Their voices carried faintly across the courtyard. "We're honored, Admiral. I've prepared full reports on our supply efficiency." The Admiral's reply was calm. "Good, but I'm more interested in your people, Captain. Numbers tell stories. People tell the truth." I watched from the window as they disappeared into headquarters. By mid-morning, whispers spread like wildfire. The Admiral had requested specific case files, personnel evaluations, even disciplinary records. I tried to stay focused, but my name came up more than once in the passing chatter. At noon, Chief Morale stopped by my desk, his hands in his pockets. "You look like you're waiting on a storm, Lieutenant." "Feels like one," I said to Chief Morales. He nodded toward the window. "Storms have a way of washing things clean." He left me with that thought, an old sailor tossing a compass your way without a map. At 1400 hours, a message came through internal comms. Lieutenant Hayes, report to Command Briefing Room 1. My pulse spiked. I smoothed my uniform, took a breath, and walked. The room was heavy with tension. Captain Briggs stood at the head of the long oak table, flanked by senior officers. Admiral Warren sat at the far end, reading from a folder, my folder. Lieutenant Hayes, Briggs announced, his voice tight. We're reviewing base operations for procedural discipline. The Admiral wanted to see an example of field deviation cases. I stood at attention, forcing calm. Yes, sir. Warren glanced up, his eyes meeting mine briefly before returning to the papers. This report says you disobeyed a standing order during an active supply transport. Is that correct? Yes, sir, I said. I stopped to assist civilians stranded in a storm. Briggs jumped in quickly. Admiral, the infraction was clear-cut. She jeopardized cargo integrity and violated the chain of command. The Admiral didn't respond immediately. He closed the folder and folded his hands. Tell me, Captain, he said, his voice quiet. Was any cargo lost? No, sir. Was anyone injured? No, sir. Was the mission ultimately completed? Yes, but then the only failure, Warren interrupted quietly, was moral judgment. Yours or hers, I'm still deciding which. The room went completely still. Briggs's jaw tightened. Sir, the Admiral stood slowly. His presence filled the space like gravity itself. Captain Briggs, he said, addressing the room but looking at Briggs. When I was a junior officer, my co taught me something I never forgot. Leadership isn't measured by who blindly follows orders. It's measured by who can make the right call when orders fall short. He turned to me. You made a hard call that night, Lieutenant. Yes, sir, I said, my voice low. I'd make it again. Warren nodded once, a faint smile touching his lips. That's what I thought. Without another word, he gathered the folder and left the room. The door closed behind him with a quiet, deliberate click. Briggs stood frozen, the color draining from his face. The other officers avoided eye contact. I saluted and exited quietly. Outside, sunlight poured across the courtyard, hot against the white concrete. For the first time in weeks, I felt something unexplainable. Calm. Honor doesn't announce itself. It just waits for the truth to catch up. The next morning, I woke to an email marked urgent. Report to Admiral's quarters. 1000. I smoothed my uniform. The air was heavy with that stillness before a storm, but this one wasn't in the sky. The Admiral's quarters were high up, in a place few lieutenants ever set foot. I knocked. Enter, came the voice from within, steady, calm, unmistakable. I stepped in. The room was spacious, lined with maps and framed photos of ships. Admiral Warren stood by the window, sunlight catching the silver in his hair. Lieutenant Hayes, he said, thank you for coming. I saluted. Sir. He gestured to a chair. At ease, have a seat. I hesitated before sitting. He studied me quietly for a moment. You're probably wondering why you're here. Yes, sir. He smiled faintly. So am I. He picked up a file from his desk, my personnel record. You've been in service 12 years, 2 commendations for crisis logistics, 1 NATO humanitarian deployment. No disciplinary actions until 2 weeks ago. Yes, sir. He looked up. Tell me about that night on Route 58. I swallowed, choosing my words carefully. There was a family stranded in the storm, sir. A man, his wife, and their child. The vehicle was disabled. No signal. I towed them to safety, knowing it violated transport protocol. He nodded. Why? Because they were in danger, sir, and because sometimes doing nothing feels worse than breaking a rule. The Admiral leaned back, hands clasped loosely. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, softly, that family you helped, the man, the woman, the child, were mine. The air seemed to vanish from the room. He continued quietly, his eyes on me, but his voice far away. My daughter and grandson were driving back from DC that night. I'd warned them about the weather. Their car broke down an hour from base. You found them before hypothermia did. I couldn't speak. All I could hear was the pounding rain again, the child's face in the back seat. He walked around the desk and stood beside me. You didn't know who they were, but you stopped anyway. You risked your career to help strangers. I've read your report and Captain Briggs's." His tone hardened. "He called your decision reckless. I call it something else." "What's that, sir?" I managed. "Leadership." He turned toward the window, looking out at the bay. "I joined the Navy 40 years ago. I've seen sailors who obeyed every order and lost every ounce of humanity doing it. I've seen others who broke the rules and saved lives. The difference is conscience." I stared down at my hand, still trembling. "Sir, I didn't expect anything. I wasn't trying to—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "That's why it matters." He returned to his desk and pressed a button on the intercom. "Send in Captain Briggs." My heart jumped. The door opened and Briggs entered, stiff-backed, clearly unprepared for the sight of the Admiral's serious expression and me sitting across from him. "Admiral, sir," Briggs began, "if this is about the audit—" "It is," Warren said evenly, "but not in the way you think." "Sit down, Captain." Briggs obeyed, the tension visible in every line of his jaw. The Admiral folded his arms. "Captain, 2 weeks ago, one of your officers disobeyed a protocol to save 3 lives, one of whom happens to be my daughter. You reprimanded her, reassigned her, and publicly humiliated her in front of her peers." Briggs stiffened. "Sir, my actions were within regulation." "I know," the Admiral cut in. "That's the problem." The silence that followed was colder than any rainstorm. Warren stepped closer to him. "You enforce order, Captain. That's your job. But order without judgment isn't discipline. It's blindness. You've created a culture where fear replaces initiative, where officers are punished for compassion." Briggs's face paled. "Sir, Enough," Warren said quietly, and the tone in his voice could have cut steel. "As of now, I am relieving you of command pending review. You'll report to Fleet Operations in DC for reassignment. Do you understand?" Briggs stared at him, disbelief flickering behind the formality. "Yes, sir," he said hoarsely. The Admiral turned to me. "Lieutenant Hayes, you are temporarily assigned to Acting Operations Officer until further notice. You'll oversee all humanitarian logistics reviews starting today." "Sir," I said, stunned. He smiled faintly. "Consider it restitution. I want your instincts guiding this base." For the first time in weeks, my chest loosened. I saluted sharply. "Aye, sir." Warren returned the salute. "Good, and Hayes, thank you. You didn't just save my family. You reminded me what the word honor is supposed to mean." When I stepped outside, the morning sunlight broke through the clouds. Sailors crossed the courtyard, unaware that anything had changed. I walked past the same hangar where I'd been demoted days earlier. Everything felt lighter, cleaner, as if the storm had finally ended. I looked up toward the flag snapping in the breeze and whispered quietly, "Aye, sir." Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It arrives in a quiet office wearing 4 silver stars. By noon, the whole base knew Captain Briggs had been relieved of command. The same officers who once avoided looking at me now nodded respectfully. I didn't gloat. It wasn't victory. It was something quieter, heavier. That afternoon, I was called to the command briefing room again. This time, I walked in with steady steps. Admiral Warren was already seated at the head of the table. "Sit down, Commander Hayes," he said. The word stopped me. "Sir," he smiled faintly, "temporary promotion. It'll be formalized soon enough. For now, consider it an order." I sat. My heart thudded once hard. "Thank you, sir." He folded his hands. "I've spent the morning reviewing this base's entire operational record. The numbers look fine, but the morale doesn't. Too much fear, too little trust. That changes today." He paused, studying me the way a teacher studies a student who's already passed the test. "You made one unauthorized stop, Lieutenant. It saved 3 lives. I want to understand what went through your mind when you decided to pull over." I took a breath. "Honestly, sir, I didn't think. I just saw a child in danger and acted." "That's what leadership looks like," he said. "Instinct born from integrity." The door opened. Chief Morale stepped in, followed by a young ensign with a recorder. "You wanted the maintenance logs, Admiral," Morale said. Warren nodded. "Thank you, Chief. Stay, please. You might like to hear this." Morales shot me a puzzled look and leaned against the wall. The Admiral rose to his feet. Captain Briggs believed rules alone built discipline. He forgot that discipline without conscience collapses into cruelty. I've seen it before. The Navy must be better. He turned to Morales. You've served 30 years, Chief. What keeps sailors loyal? Respect, sir, Morales said without hesitation. Not rank, not fear, respect. Warren nodded. Exactly. He motioned toward me. Lieutenant Hayes showed that she disobeyed a regulation, yes, but she upheld something bigger, the purpose behind it. The ensign typed rapidly as Warren's words echoed through the room. Effective immediately, the Admiral continued. This reprimand is rescinded. Hayes's record will reflect a commendation for humanitarian judgment under adverse conditions. Her example will be used in officer training. I blinked. Sir, that's not necessary. It is, he interrupted gently. Because someday another young officer will face the same choice you did, and when they read your story, I want them to know the Navy stands for more than rules. Morales grinned. About time someone said it out loud. Warren looked at him. Chief, I'd like your help writing that policy, something to ensure we never punish decency again. Be my honor, sir. The Admiral turned back to me. You'll oversee the review. I trust you can balance regulation with humanity. I'll do my best, Admiral, he smiled, but there was a softness in it now, a father's gratitude rather than a commander's pride. That's why I chose you. Later that evening, I walked along the seawall outside headquarters. The wind carried salt and diesel, the familiar scent of duty. Permission to join you, a voice said behind me. I turned. Admiral Warren stood there in his dress blues, hands behind his back. Of course, sir. He joined me at the railing. Beautiful evening, he said. Yes, sir. For a long time we stood without speaking. Finally, he said quietly, my daughter told me about the moment you stopped. She said you looked calm even in the chaos. I smiled faintly. Truth is, I was terrified, but the job teaches you to move even when you're scared. He nodded. That's the difference between courage and bravado. One is loud, the other just does what needs doing. He turned to face me fully. You've reminded an old officer why we wear this uniform, Commander Hayes. Thank you, sir. I returned the sentiment. Sir, I'll be leaving Norfolk soon, he continued. But before I do, I want to establish something here, a standing directive. We're calling it the Samaritan Rule. Any officer who stops to render aid, even in violation of orders, will not be punished if lives are saved. I felt my throat tighten. That's a good rule, sir, he smiled. It's your rule, Commander. You inspired it. He extended his hand. I shook it firmly, the way sailors do when words aren't enough. As he walked away, his silhouette merged with the setting sun. The storm that had started everything was gone, but its echo remained. I stood there a long while, watching the flag ripple above the harbor, the light fading to gold. The bass loudspeaker called Evening Colors. I saluted quietly. The storm had passed, and for once, the wind felt like forgiveness. The ceremony wasn't grand. No bands, no photographers, just a handful of sailors in the hangar bay. Still, my hands trembled as I stood at attention before Admiral Warren. Sunlight poured through the doors, glinting off the water and the polished aircraft. The Admiral stepped forward, holding a small velvet box. Inside was a single silver oak leaf, Commander rank. Lieutenant Daniel Hayes, he began, voice steady but warm. Your service record has been amended to reflect commendation for judgment under crisis conditions. Effective immediately, you are promoted to the rank of commander. My throat tightened. Thank you, sir. He pinned the insignia on my shoulder himself, then leaned in slightly. Some lessons take a storm to be remembered. You've taught one to the entire chain of command. The sailors behind me applauded softly. Chief Morales grinned from the back row. When the Admiral turned to address the unit, his tone shifted, firm, clear, unforgettable. Every rule we write exists for a reason, he said. But no rule, no procedure, no checklist will ever outweigh the value of a human life. Commander Hayes knew that when others forgot. Let this base remember that leadership isn't measured in perfect reports. It's measured in moral courage. Silence filled the hangar. After the ceremony, sailors came up one by one to shake my hand. Miller approached last. He was quieter than usual. "Congrats, Commander," he said. "You earned it." I nodded. "Thank you, Lieutenant." He hesitated, then added, "I didn't understand back then about what you did." I gave him a small smile. "Most people don't until they're the one standing in the storm." He nodded, eyes down, and left without another word. That evening, I found myself back on the same stretch of road outside Norfolk Base. I stood there for a long time, staring at the place where I'd stopped that night. The sound of distant thunder rolled through the horizon, only now it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like memory. A year passed. The storm still came to Virginia every spring, but I'd stopped fearing the sound of thunder. It reminded me that life's hardest weather sometimes cleans the air. I now led Project Samaritan, the humanitarian logistics initiative Admiral Warren had envisioned. Our small team delivered supplies during floods and hurricanes. The motto painted on every transport truck came from something he'd once said to me: "Order serves people, or it serves nothing." The younger officers under my command weren't afraid to make moral calls. When one of them once asked, "Ma'am, what if we get written up for stopping to help someone?" I smiled and pointed to the plaque on the wall. "The Samaritan rule," I said. "You won't." One afternoon, I received a letter. The handwriting was neat, old-fashioned. The return address was Washington, D.C. It was from Captain Rhett Briggs. "Commander Hayes, I heard about the program you're running. You were right. I was wrong. I spent my career thinking leadership meant control. You showed me it means conscience. I've applied for a volunteer post with the Red Cross. Maybe it's time I learn what real logistics is." I set the letter down slowly. Outside my office window, sunlight spilled across the depot yard. For the first time, I felt no bitterness, only closure. Some lessons take longer to land than others. Weeks later, Admiral Warren visited the base for the first anniversary of Project Samaritan. Age had slowed his walk, but his eyes still held that steady warmth. He insisted on no ceremony, just a quiet tour. We walked through the hangar where rows of our trucks gleamed under the lights. He paused beside one bearing the blue and gold Samaritan emblem. "You did this," he said softly. "You took one act of decency and built a doctrine." I shook my head. "You did, sir. I just followed the map you drew." He chuckled. "Maps are useless without someone brave enough to drive the road." We ended up by the pier watching the sun sink beyond the horizon. The air was still, the water turning molten gold. "I sometimes wonder," he said, "how many people pass through life never realizing they already made their greatest difference in a single small moment." I looked at him. That night on Route 58, I wasn't thinking about difference. I just saw a family who needed help. "And that," he said, "is exactly why it mattered." We stood there in silence. Then, in that low, gravelly voice that carried the weight of 4 decades of service, he added, "The Navy runs on rules, Commander, but it survives on people like you." I wanted to thank him, but the words caught in my throat. So I did what felt right. I saluted. He returned it crisp and perfect, his eyes glimmering in the fading light. When he left that evening, he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photo, grainy but clear, taken from a motel security camera on that stormy night. My truck headlights bright, the stranded SUV beside it, rain streaking through the air like threads of silver. On the back, written in his careful hand, "For when the storms return, so you remember what courage looks like in the dark." I framed it on my desk. Months later, we were called to respond to a hurricane that tore through the Carolinas. I drove again. I couldn't help it. I needed to feel the wheel, the road, the purpose. My team followed behind in convoy formation. Roads were flooded, power lines down, homes half submerged. When we reached the first shelter, an old woman took my hand and said, "You came for us when no one else did." Her words brought me back to that night, to the Father's voice in the rain. "You've done more than you know." Maybe kindness circles back in ways we never see. That evening after the mission, I sat by the truck watching the clouds drift apart. The world smelled of wet earth and diesel fuel. I thought of all the people who had taught me. My father, Chief Morales, Admiral Warren, even Captain Briggs. Each had shaped the compass I carried inside. A gentle breeze rolled across the base, tugging at the flag overhead. I whispered, "Aye, sir." Not to anyone present, but to the memory of every storm, every decision that had brought me here. Because honor isn't loud. It doesn't demand recognition or revenge. It waits quiet, steady, until the right choice is made. As the sun set behind the hangars, I turned back toward my office, where the framed photo gleamed in the twilight. I smiled and murmured to myself, one act of mercy can change an entire chain of command. Then, with the same calm resolve that had once made me stop on Route 58, I picked up my pen and signed the next mission order. For older Americans who once wore the uniform or simply believed in doing right when no one's looking, this story belongs to you. If it touched something in you, share it. Remind someone that kindness, like service, never retires. And if you've ever faced your own storm, may you find the courage to pull over and help.